Hi, I just wanted to give our listeners a trigger warning for this episode. This episode contains themes of sexual violence, potential murder. So if those topics are not for you, then we'll see you next week. Otherwise, we hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome back to Coven.
Hi.
Hello. Season 2, episode 4.
Yeah.
This is a podcast where we cultivate our dream Coven roster, bringing to light the lost stories of enigmatic people throughout history whose fascinating lives echo the complex archetype of the witch.
How you doing?
Good. I'm feeling good. This week is Coco's episode, so
Yeah.
I have no idea who she brought, but...
Oh, well, I wanted to do a magic moment first.
Yeah.
Actually.
What's your magic moment?
Okay, so when I was trying to figure out whether or not I wanted to do this person, and I was researching this person, I found a YouTube video, and I was really excited about it because it was a lecture at UC Berkeley, and Sierra and I both went to UC Berkeley, got our degrees in gender. Well, she double majored in film and gender and women's studies, and I got my bachelor's in gender and women's studies. But so first I got excited about that. And then when I pushed play, I can't tell you everything that this person said, but I'm just gonna quote what she said in the beginning. This is what she said. Maybe by way of introduction. Oh, and let me just quickly say that while I was at Berkeley, I was enrolled in an astronomy class, and this professor spent the first few minutes literally saying that astrology was crap. He used that word too, and it really bummed me out. And I ended up dropping the class, and I ended up getting into like an email discussion with him. And he was actually really nice about it, but I was bummed because as a place of learning, and the fact that this person knew nothing about astrology,
Right.
I just got really bummed out because I kind of felt like it was narrow-minded, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I got really excited to see this lecture. And then when I pressed play, this is what this lecturer said. Maybe by way of introduction, I can say something a little bit astrological. I was like, okay, I'm in. And then she went on to say, and by the way, this lecture actually got my person's date wrong, but she said she was born on November 17th, 1948, which those of you who follow your horoscopes and other horoscopes, yes, we know that is a Scorpio. And then she also said, so regardless of whether or not we think astrology is funny or insane, and so that was my magic moment, and I knew that that this was the right person.
That's so close to my birthday. What is your person's actual birthday?
Oh, yeah. Their actual birthday is November 18th, so I'm going to
Even
go
closer to my birthday.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you the
let's
chart,
go.
and Jenna is going to do a cold reading. So here you go.
Because
What
I
do you
don't know
see?
who Coco's inviting into the Coven today.
Yeah, and I'll just say while you're looking at it that this person is a Scorpio sun, a Gemini moon, and there was no birth time, so I'm making an educated guess that she was a Taurus rising. So, what do you see?
Okay. Okay, so first thing that stands out to me is the Uranus conjunct the moon in Gemini, opposing Jupiter conjunct Mars.
Yep.
That's pretty crazy. Uranus conjunct the moon is like, okay, my first thought is some pretty tumultuous experiences with the mother, or just like the emotional, like childhood experiences, the inner child, maybe like a really unpredictable energy, like the moon being your shadow inner child emotional body being maybe massive mood swings or just all around this unpredictable energy may be really uncomfortable for people to be around. In Gemini, the moon in Gemini is always with really intelligent people. Like the smartest people I know have a moon in Gemini. Mm-hmm. They're just quick. They just understand things and can articulate them really well. And articulation, Scorpio, right there with the sun and Chiron. Yeah, I mean, has a lot of power with their words. Definitely transformative abilities with language and with communication. This Jupiter-Mars combo is interesting. In the 8th, 9th, and 8th house. I mean, a big ego. A big ego with the Jupiter-Mars makes me just think of especially Mars and Sag. Jupiter's debilitated in Capricorn, which is interesting, which kind of stifles that a little bit. It limits it, that Saturnian influence over that Jupiter placement. But it is definitely somebody really driven, really motivated, who would really believe in themselves. But with it being in Capricorn, it definitely adds an element of like limitations, like believes in themselves to a limit. Like I have Jupiter in Capricorn. And so it's like definitely this sense, it's kind of always this like sense of doubt around these big dreams of like, am I actually capable of this? Can I actually achieve this? But with Mars there, it is like, no matter what, keep going, even if I don't actually believe that I can. And it's in the 8th and 9th house. So again, with all that Scorpio, makes me think a lot with themes of death, rebirth. I mean, sexuality, transformation.
Yes.
Yeah, the death, rebirth, sexuality, the passion. The moon Uranus opposition. If it is in the 2nd house, I said the thing about the mom, but the other thing that I say in readings when somebody has their moon in their 2nd house is, oh, mommy's favorite. Because moon in the 2nd house is an indication of like the golden child of the mother. The 2nd house represents our most valued things, our favorite things, and moon represents the mother. So moon in the 2nd house. Actually, my brother has moon in Gemini in the 2nd house. And Mom, I know you love all of us if you're listening, but we all know Jacob's your favorite. So yeah, that's interesting to have mommy's favorite and have Uranus there. It is like this safe, but at the same time, super unpredictable emotional energy. And that seems to be like a motivating, it like encourages that Jupiter-Mars energy of like incessant motivation to achieving things. Venus conjunct Neptune in Libra in the 6th house. I mean, unrealistic fantasies about relationships. And that's forming a trine with the moon too. So maybe there's some, lack of boundaries. This is not to bring in Anais, but some lack of boundaries in, and I see they were born in Cuba. Cuba.
That was one of the things
that's funny.
From the last episode when you were talking.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the lack of boundaries with the Venus in Libra, which I also have. Venus in Libra conjunct Neptune and trining the moon. That could definitely be some codependent tendencies. Really wanting to just dissolve into another person. And Scorpio, all that Scorpio in the 7th house is even more of like wanting to just like become one with. Whereas like Pisces, that Neptune energy is like dissolving into another person. Scorpio is like, no, I want to like be inside you. Like not in a sexual way, but also a sexual. but also sexual way. Like Scorpio is the sign of sex, but be inside you. It's like I want to be in your skin. Like I want to be in you.
You're killing it.
And Libra is very much like I want to be like linked to you. Like we can be individual, but I want to be with you at all times. So there is this like really obsessive energy about this person. Yeah. Pluto Libra. Were they born in the like recent, like in the last century?
Yeah. So they were born in 1948.
Okay. Yeah. So Pluto Leo boomer.
They are no longer with us.
No longer with us. Was a boomer, would have been a boomer. But that's not a bad thing inherently.
No.
To be a part of that generation. Saturn, trine, Jupiter. Okay, there is a sense of responsibility. So probably that fierce motivation that they have to achieving this grand thing, they feel an intense responsibility to it, an intense commitment to it. It's their life's work, as we spoke earlier. And in the 5th house, I'm assuming their life's work is creative in some way, and also healing. It's in Virgo, something that heals things through creative expression.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's all I have right now.
Okay. Yeah. So the one thing, yes to everything. The one thing that I was hoping that you would see is how the moon and the 6th house has to do with the physical body as well.
Oh, in the 2nd house?
Just the moon in general has to do with our physical body, and then the 6th house also has to do with our physical body, but it's okay.
Wait, but the moon isn't in the 6th house.
No. But there's a trine from the moon to Venus.
Interesting.
And Venus and Neptune are in the 6th house, which has to do with the physical body, and then the moon also has to do with the physical body. But anyway, so are you ready?
Yeah, let's go.
But everything else,
let's go.
Yes, especially when you were saying that this person wants to be like in someone and the transformation and rebirth, et cetera, et cetera. So my person is Ana Mendieta.
Wow,
do you know who that is?
Similar name. No.
I know. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. No, I've never heard of this person.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you. So Ana Mendieta was a decolonized feminist Cuban-American interdisciplinary artist, and she was renowned for her innovative earth body artworks. She literally did these pieces of art that were called siluetas, where she was inside of the earth, one with the earth. So there were these like silhouettes of a human in the earth, and well, I'll get into it a little bit more. So I have some quotes. I will only do one, but this is very relevant also to what you were saying when you did the reading. She said, because there's very much a mother element here too, which you also said with the moon. My art is the way I reestablish the bonds that unite me to the universe. It is a return to the maternal source. So yeah, when you were talking about mom stuff, I was like, yes, exactly. So her mother's name was Raquel Oti de Rojas, and her father's name was Ignacio Alberto Mendieta de Lisaur. And basically, the reason why Ana Mendieta was why her mother was so important is because at the age of 12, amidst the political turmoil, Ana and her sister were sent to the United States, a part of this thing called Operation Peter Pan, which is a program that relocated over 14,000 Cuban children to the U.S. between 1960 and 1962. So it was just her and her sister. And her family in Cuba was upper middle class. And so when she was relocated here, she actually had to go to a reform school, and she went from foster home to foster home to foster home, and she experienced extreme discrimination, extreme racism. Just think of the worst racial slurs that you can possibly think of, and that is what she was called. So if you can imagine living in a place where everybody looked like you, and then you go somewhere else and nobody looks like you, and they're all talking to you about how you look and basically telling you that you're nothing because of that. Plus, she was separated from her mother, and that really traumatized her severely.
That inner child, the moon with Uranus, that disruptive childhood thing is super interesting. And creating, I didn't say this earlier, but the moon Uranus is like an inner spirit that is extremely rebellious. And
she was extremely rebellious.
And it makes sense going through something like that. It creates a fighting spirit of like,
absolutely,
tear it all down. If it doesn't accept me, I'm gonna
absolutely. Yeah. So according to her sister, discovering art became a powerful force in her life, and she was finally reunited with her mother and her younger brother in 1966 after years apart. When she, became of college age, she pursued her passion for art at the University of Iowa. She earned a Bachelor of Arts in Painting in 1972, and she had this mentor named Hans Breder, who was 13 years older than her, and they became lovers. Then she earned her Master's of Fine Arts in Intermedia in 1977, and her first performances involved rituals addressing themes of exile and identity. And this later evolved into her famed Earth Body works, which literally, when you were saying that she wanted to be in something, it was like, that is exactly what she did. So her major works in career development was between 1973 and 1983. And she created this thing called the Silueta series. And what it was 200 pieces created during the time where she traveled between Iowa and Mexico. I forgot to say, when she was brought over, she was just dumped in Iowa. But she ended up loving Iowa and would go back regularly. She would use materials like flowers, leaves, blood, and fire, the elements. And everything that you were saying about transformation and very, very much Ana. She would document her art with film, photography, but she was also a sculptor and a painter. And she would explore themes of cultural displacement, femininity, and the female form. And she was also able to teach in many, many art programs. And she received prestigious prizes, including the Rome Prize. So she was given a grant, and then she was able to go over and do art in Rome. So I wanted to show you a piece of her art, and then we can also post this later on. And then also I'll just give you the, here's a transit chart for when she created this particular piece as well, called Body Tracks. And I'll tell you exactly what she did. I'll let you look at her chart while I tell you about it. So creating art with elements was an act of finding hope. Go ahead.
Is this blood?
So it's a combination of blood and paint. She actually tried to work just with blood, but unfortunately it would coagulate and turn brown. And so she wanted it to be red. So she would mix it together. Yeah.
So if you're just listening to this on Spotify, maybe just go to YouTube and look, because I don't even know if I can really explain this.
Well, I'll describe what it is that she does. So basically, what it was there were people in a semicircle in a room, and you just see these white pieces of paper put on a wall, and you hear like a drum beat, like, that's all you hear. And she walked in. And honestly, what you were wearing last week or in our last podcast, like, that's what she was wearing.
Interesting. Wow.
And she walks in, and I think she was barefoot, but she dips her hands in the blood/paint and puts her hands on the wall, and then she doesn't acknowledge her audience, and then she presses her hands firmly to the surface and then draws them down to the ground. So I was checking out some of her artwork, and I was watching a film that somebody actually made. It was a kind of a combination of a bunch of her pieces, and we've been so busy because of finals and having to do all this research that I was in a hurry. And when I first started watching it, it's the first film is just of her face, and I can't remember what it was called, but eventually after a few minutes blood just starts to drip down her face, but it's after a while. You're sitting there just looking at her face for a while, right? And when I started to just kind of relax and watch, I was moved by her artwork. That was the first film, but then they showed the subsequent films were really moving to me. There was another one where she's just floating in the ocean, and the waves are carrying her back and forth, and she's completely naked. And this was back when, women still had all of their hair intact, and so you know what I'm. So it's all there, and it was beautiful.
Full bush.
Yes, exactly, full bush.
Coming back, it's trending again.
Well, it's been trending for me for a while now, but anyway,
Never stopped. But in pop culture, it's trending again. Just so you know.
I guess I'm in style then. But anyway, so it was just super moving, because all of a sudden she looked like she literally was a part of the ocean, and that was her goal, was because since her mother, since she was separated from her mother, and she was also separated from her home, which was Cuba, she felt like she was abandoned in some ways by her mother. And so she wanted a mother. So her mother was Mother Earth, and she was basically being cradled by Mother Earth. And there was a lot of expansion and contraction. And then there was another one where you just see, and it's all silent. There's no sound. It's really, really amazing. I highly recommend checking out her artwork, because it's just, I literally got teary-eyed watching it, and all of a sudden all of my responsibilities just kind of melted away, and I was just profoundly moved by her art. But there's another one where you just see landscape, and it's just like, there are a lot of landscape films, but you just see landscape, and you're just kind of staring, and then all of a sudden you see this expansion and contraction start to happen, and you realize that she's laying in the landscape with the rocks on her, and it's like, whoa, I didn't even realize that she was there. That's cool. And then I have kind of a really funny story too, because this is a side note, but as I was watching, I look over and I see my cats, and they're watching. And then one of our cats, Nando, he jumps down from where he was, and I have this all on film too. I'll have to show you guys later. And he jumps up in front of the television, and he's staring at it, and then he just slowly puts his paw up to the screen. I have it all on video. I'll show you guys later. It's crazy. So it was not just moving for me, but it was also moving for my animal companions. So as far as like her philosophical and political perspectives went, she did not identify her work with either modernism or postmodernism. She was a feminist. She explored non-Western approaches to art and spirituality, particularly Afro-Caribbean traditions and Santeria. She believed in something called a cosmic sap that connected all life forms. And that was another reason why I felt like this was so appropriate, because of, just the connection to astrology, that everything is connected.
It all comes back to something. Every artistic, philosophical, spiritual cosmology all comes down to, there's this thing that connects everything.
Yeah.
Like, it's truly the root of everything.
Oh, and I was going to ask you, did you...
With this, with the body
notice
tracks.
Anything?
I mean, Saturn and the moon, and Pluto all going over her Venus Neptune conjunction is definitely that, like, I mean, Saturn going over that, like Venus Neptune is like her artist placement is what it seems like, because Venus and Neptune are both about like art and beauty and just kind of like painting the divine, I guess, painting in whatever form, but I guess in her form literally, and having Saturn go right over that. It's like Saturn is right in between her Neptune and Venus.
Yeah.
It's like putting something out there that's lasting. It is like taking it seriously. It's putting it into the world. It's completion.
I also saw that as, structure, but like, because like, whenever I think of Saturn too, I think of like borders and boundaries, and siluetas were literally like a earth border around her body,
Was this is for the specifically for this project,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, but it's just her motivation for it,
Yeah.
like yeah.
Yeah,
So
that
anyway,
makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
And then obviously Neptune going right over that Jupiter-Mars conjunction. It's again like it's that motivation to like achieve something, but it's like through this fantastical artistic lens. And then you have the sun, the Mercury Cazimi is also happening, which is just always a good thing for putting things out and expression, and that's happening exactly opposite all of the Libra stuff with Saturn, Moon, Pluto, and then her natal Venus and Neptune. So, and it's in her 12th house.
Yep.
So it is like, yeah, illuminating the shadow, the underworld of that.
Yeah. And, even though I wasn't sure about her birth time, I just made the assumption that she was a Taurus rising because of like the earth
Yeah, so much of the body.
elements. Yeah. Yeah.
Taurus to me, honestly, seems. Sometimes I connect Taurus more to the body than Virgo at times. I mean, all of the earth signs are connected to the body, but Taurus to me feels more of like the senses, like the energy of the body, whereas Virgo's like health.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I totally agree.
you know what I mean?
I have a lot of Taurus friends.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Taurus
It's
are
the
so
senses.
embodied, and
Yes.
it is so
Yeah.
sensual. And I mean, it's ruled by Venus.
Yeah.
So obviously sensual. Whereas
Food and comfort
Yes.
and yeah.
Yeah, it's the senses. Whereas Virgo is very much more,
Health, yoga.
yeah.
Yeah. Pilates.
Right.
So
the functions of the body.
yeah, exactly. So as far as her feminism went, and this was another reason why I just fell in love with her, she was very critical of white feminists. She felt like white feminists did not pay enough attention to feminists of color. And so she approached her artwork and gender through a decolonial, racially aware lens. She would some of her pieces of art are of her photographed and distorting her own body, which is actually an act of rebellion in and of itself, because she was taking away the male gaze. So rather than taking pictures of her body in the types of positions that we normally see women's bodies, she would distort them on purpose to decentralize the male gaze. Does that make sense? Yeah,
Yeah.
subvert the male gaze.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. She was active in women's galleries and marginalized women's organizations and the African diasporic organizations. She would create work addressing violence against women. And this was ironic, and I will explain why later. She insisted her silhouette works were self-portraiture. She explored goddess imagery and female forms from Caribbean and indigenous perspectives. And she would raise questions about how to represent the female body without falling into essentialism. And I want to give a trigger warning right now because I'm going to describe another piece of her art, but it's violent. So I'm just going to put that out there. So if you don't want to
Right.
hear this, fast forward. There's a piece that was well, it was unnamed, but it online it's called the rape scene. And so a few years into her studies at the University of Iowa, while Mendieta was enrolled in Hans Breder's intermedia art course, a fellow student named Sarah Ann Ottens was brutally raped and killed. And in response to the incident and as a vehicle to express the horror of male sexual violence, Mendieta staged a poignant and shocking performance. She would invite students and professors to stop by her apartment at any given time. And when they would walk in, they would find her naked and tied to a living room table with she basically recreated the scene of Otten's murder. She was covered in blood, and she would years later she recalled that her audience all quote all sat down and started talking about it while she quote stayed in position about an hour. The interaction between the artists and attendees became a cathartic way for the community to dialogue and process the horror that happened in its midst. This is another reason why the last podcast I was like, kind of amazed at who you had picked because of the facing this shadow side to things that most people don't want to talk
Yeah.
about, don't
People
want to
don't want to look
face,
at.
don't want to look at exactly. But she
Shoves it in their face.
yes,
Literally.
exactly, yeah. So just to let you know, I don't think I can ever look at the photo again. The photos that I saw again, they were really harsh and jolting. So I don't know if I would recommend that, but I thought it was very bold of her to do that. So I'm gonna kind of extend the trigger warning because I'm going to be talking about her death. And this is actually a very important part of, I think it's important because of what she wanted to bring to the surface and talk about, the Plutonian, the Scorpio characteristics of wanting to, dig in to, pull up all of the compost,
Yeah.
basically. So this person is actually still alive. This man who was her husband and who there's it's speculated that he might have been responsible for her death. But so I'm just going to talk about him, and I don't want to center him or anything, but I think it's important for context.
Right.
So his name is Carl Andre, and he was born in 1935 outside of Boston. He came from a working class family, but he attended a prestigious private school on scholarship. He met an influential artist named Frank Stella in school who inspired him to pursue art. And the timing that Carl arrived in Soho is important as well because this was when Soho is not anything like what it is today. It was actually really cheap rent, and artists flocked there because they could get these huge spaces in New York City for really super cheap because it was like warehouses. And so he arrived there in 1956 and he became a pioneer of minimalist art. No offense to minimalist artists out there, but to be honest with you, it was nothing special to me because, and I'll explain it. I mean, I'll describe it. It was bricks stacked one on top of each other. He was known for spare, simple works using ordinary materials, and I saw some pictures of it and I was not impressed at all. It was literally bricks stacked on each other and that was it. Or bricks in a geometric triangle in the corner of a room and that was it.
Innovative.
Yeah. Which made me think too that maybe possibly one of the reasons why things went so awry is because she was so very talented. And again, no offense to minimalist artists out there. I'm sure there are many, many talented minimalist artists, but I just was not impressed at all. I could be biased too because I know the story, but still. He was famous for the controversial piece using just lined up bricks. By 1970s.
Wait, what was controversial about it?
Oh, you know what? I actually don't know. That was just something that I researched, but I would assume that it was probably controversial because there was nothing to it.
That's what I was going to say. Controversial because nobody understood why it was supposed to be good.
Right. That's what I'm assuming. So by the 1970s and 80s, he had become a powerful figure in the Soho art scene. He was a white man, after all. He could make or break careers. He had significant influence over which artists got into galleries and which ones did not. He was described as the, quote, godfather of the downtown art scene, and he was known for having considerable power in minimalist and conceptual art movements. So that's his background. They met in 1979 at Artists in Residence Gallery, and he was a panelist reviewing her show. And after the show, they went out with others for a night on the town, and he was immediately smitten and began aggressive pursuit. And I'm gonna try really hard not to get emotional while I talk about this, but it's hard not to just because I've been a victim of sexual assault and a victim of domestic violence, and reading about her and learning about her, like it really hit me hard. And some of the things that this guy did, I recognized immediately. So he called frequently, sent flowers, invited her out repeatedly, just would not. Yes, exactly. Love bombs. Their relationship represented a power dynamic. He was established and he was an influential older artist, and she was young and she was an emerging artist trying to break into scene. Who are you?
I don't want to.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard, but I really think it's important that her story get out there. And again, I don't want to center, this or him, but I think it's really important
to understand that dynamic.
Yes. She was impressed. So this is what her sister said, because I actually I watched several documentaries, but one of the documentaries, her sister was being interviewed, and her sister said that she was impressed by his intellectual art conversations and connections. This is also, it's also notable that he was a large man, very tall, very big, and she was under 5 feet.
Oh, wow. She's little.
Tiny. She was tiny, yeah. Physically, she was tiny, but she was not tiny. She was definitely a force. The differences between their art were, he was a minimalist, and hers was earthwork and feminism. And it was kind of known, not kind of, it was known in the art scene that they would have frequent public fights. They got especially violent when they were drinking, and Andre was known to be violent in general. So when Ana moved to New York in 1983, she became a part of the art scene, and her work started to gain international recognition. So this was kind of where I started to think that maybe he didn't like that. And they had a serious breakup before she went to Rome. And again, you know, my own experience with in situations like these, I recognized it because I'm assuming that he went to Rome because, you know, she left, or they broke up, she left, and it my research, I found that they reconciled in Europe. So I'm assuming that he went there. And so, to everyone's surprise, they got married on January 17th, 1985. For the first few months, and this again was what her sister said, Andre introduced her as, "This is my wife, the woman of my life." And then by April, he stopped introducing her as his wife. And she found all these notes from other women, and the public fights continued, and she was completely devastated by him returning to his old behaviors. So when she died, the final night that she died, there was a 30-minute phone call with her sister Raquelin, and she was speaking in Spanish, and her sister was, you know, basically like, you know, he can hear you, he can hear what you're saying, because she was talking about divorcing him and everything, and Ana was like, but he doesn't understand Spanish, and Raquelin was like, yeah, but divorcio sounds just like divorce, so he was probably understanding what you're saying, and so they had been fighting that night. It came out later that they had been fighting that night. There was an early 911 call on the morning of September 8th, 1985. And I have the chart for when she, the transit chart for when she died, if you want to check it out. What do you see there?
I mean, the Venus on top of Pluto is quite interesting.
Yeah.
Relationships. I mean, Pluto representing death sometimes, along with Saturn, but Pluto representing, and Saturn also representing death, at like actual death of time over her son.
Yep.
And Venus over Pluto, which is the death as well, but Venus being relationships and romance.
And then Mars right there too.
Yeah, Mars right approaching her Saturn, and Mercury, Moon right over Uranus, exactly on Uranus.
Well, I don't know if that was the right exact time, but I mean, it was
close.
Yeah.
So, and Neptune exactly conjunct Jupiter. To kind of like return to the...
Yeah.
Which is interesting because that's kind of what was happening with the same time. Oh, because this was pretty close.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like the same era of her art event.
Yeah. And a lot of her artworks. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So,
we've been fact checked by our wonderful producer, Sierra.
I had no idea that he died this year. I thought he was still alive. I was scared that he was going to come back after me, but
Sierra informed us that this man is in fact dead as of this year.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, he had an apartment at 300 Mercer Street on the 34th floor, and there was an early morning 911 call, and witnesses said that the doorman said that he heard a woman scream and then a loud boom, and the deli owner heard 3 screams of no, 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 and the deli owner, she fell on the roof of his deli. Now, this is crazy, okay? Because when she fell onto his roof, she created a 4 to 6 inch crater in the deli's tar roof. The reason I think this is crazy is because the siluetas, her, isn't that insane? Like, crazy, right? I had to stop and really process that because it was like almost like her destiny in a sense. So moving on, the cop said that the window that she fell out of was
Not.
physically difficult for someone of her height to climb out of, which to me is terrifying.
Did this man go to jail?
I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you what happened.
She wasn't even 40.
No. And another reason why this is like really hard, this was actually hard for me is like as my husband Chris and I were watching some of her artwork, he said to me, "You look like her." And as a woman of color who has been in volatile, abusive relationships and been love bombed and been pursued aggressively and physically violently abused, I was like, I felt like I just, it was just a very profound
Yeah.
situation that shoot, sorry, it's like I start to dissociate when I start to think about it too. So anyway, moving on. They also found fresh cuts and scratches on his face and on his arms, and he claimed that it was from the terrace door from days earlier. And when the cops went upstairs, they found, champagne bottles everywhere. But, for context, she was terrified of heights. There was actually an interview with one of her really good friends who said that they had gone, I think, to Yosemite, and that she noticed Ana having like an anxiety attack, and she was asking her what was going on, and she said, "I'm terrified of heights. I'm acrophobic." And it's no one believes that she committed suicide either, because her career was thriving and she had all of these upcoming plans, and she was not prone to depression or suicide. She was characterized as full of life.
Yeah.
So Andre got sent to Rikers Island only for a few days. His supporters quickly raised bail money, and he was released on September 10th. I know.
Why?
I know. The police said that, to their credit, they actually thought that he was guilty. It sounded like they thought he was guilty. Yeah. So the police said that they were challenged by the art world's wall of silence and the community closing ranks around him. And it took 3 grand jury attempts to get him indicted. I can't remember the quote that, I'll get into that later. But so the trial began January 19th, 1988, and it was 3 years after her death. And Andre chose a judge-only trial instead of a jury, and he actually told everybody in the art community to stay away. He just didn't want a lot of attention on this trial. That's probably why he didn't want a jury. And the evidence about the divorce plans and him cheating and all that other stuff was not allowed as motive. And this part really infuriates me, actually. His defense attorneys suggested that she was possessed due to black magic and Afro-Caribbean practices. So
Oh my God.
racist as fuck. The trial lasted 2 weeks, and the judge actually said, and I saw an interview with the judge, and the judge actually said that he felt really bad and he felt awful for the family, but there just wasn't enough evidence to convict him. So he was found not guilty in February 11th.
Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, how do they not have enough evidence in a case like this, and yet there's so many people wrongfully convicted and like serving life in prison?
He's a white man.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense how there like isn't the evidence required there when there's like people put away much longer for much less crimes with much less evidence. I don't get it.
Yeah, me neither. Well, and also the fact that he was known as being violent. He was known in the art community as being volatile, and yeah. So anyway, I can't remember what the quote was, and I probably didn't write it down because I was so disgusted by it. But he said something along the lines of like, "Justice has been served," as he walked out of the courtroom. And I'm paraphrasing. I don't know if that's exactly what he said, but it was something really gross like that. And of course, his art prices increased after the acquittal, and he bounced to Europe. But there's the silver lining to this is that
Please tell me he got karma in some way.
He did. There was always a black cloud over his head because of this, and he just kind of, it wasn't anything like he didn't like, obviously he didn't die some sort of violent death or anything. If he died this year, he was in his 90s or whatever, but he didn't really like. It just kind of, I feel like he just kind of like fell flat, and kind of
cursed to live a full, unremarkable life.
Exactly. So that's
I never heard of him. So
yeah, me neither. You know what? Actually, do check his artwork out just so that you can see how unremarkable it is. But the other silver lining is that because Ana was so beloved, women protested when his art was displayed at the Guggenheim Museum or at the Whitney Museum, and hers was not. And so what happened was these women started holding up these signs saying, "Where is Ana Mendieta?" And it became a rallying cry for Latinx, Latine, people who been disappeared and in protests. So instead of like, "Where is Ana Mendieta?" That's what started it. It's like, where is, whoever got disappeared. So she has a legacy that she can be proud of. He's probably never going to be remembered. So the case divided the art world along race, gender, class lines, and remains divided to this day. I did see some interviews with some of the artists, and just like the art world is definitely still divided. Or actually, the documentary I saw, I guess it wasn't like recent, but it was probably like, I don't know, it looks like maybe it was like 20 years ago. But the artists were still kind of, if you knew him, you would have known that he would have never been able to do that. So
right.
Ana's death remains a symbol of violence against women of color. The art establishment was criticized for embracing alleged abusers while marginalizing victims. Her family continues, and supporters continue to seek justice. And the defense's racist strategy is seen as deeply offensive to this day. And her death became a feminist issue. And the feminist art community rallied around seeking justice for her death. Her case became symbolic of violence against women, particularly women of color. And feminists protested.
Which is exactly what she was doing while she was alive. That is exactly what her work was about. So even in death,
that's why I was saying earlier that it is so ironic that her part of her work was bringing violence against women to light, literally showing people what it looked like. And, you know, and again, I didn't really want, of course, to center this, but when I was listening to the lecture that was done by her name, the name of the lecturer was Laura Perez, and she actually said, that her death was an important part of her story. And interesting too, because she was a Scorpio, and because of the Pluto placements, death and rebirth, like her rebirth now is her legacy, I feel. And her innovative fusion of performance art, sculpture, and nature has left an indelible mark on contemporary art. Her exploration of identity, feminism, and the environment continues to inspire and influence artists worldwide. And her themes of displacement, identity, and feminism continue to resonate with artists and scholars worldwide. And again, I highly recommend checking out her some of her films. Just watching in silence is it's pretty moving. Like I said, I don't mean to keep driving that home, but check it out.
Yeah, I definitely will.
So, this is why I wanted to invite her into or welcome her into our coven. Because of her connection to the earth. That was another thing too. She worked with the elements, and that's a connection to astrology as well. And her reclamation of indigenous practices, her defiance of artistic and social norms align her with our ethos, I think. And, our values as far as like, her work exemplifies reclamation of, feminine power, challenges colonial and patriarchal narratives. And yeah, this is why I wanted to invite her into our coven. And I picture Ana hanging out among some natural elements here: earth, fire, water, and air, symbolizing the forces that she became a part of in her art.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have Sorwana,
Yeah.
and we have Alice,
Yeah.
and we have Ana, and we have Anais.
Yeah.
Yeah, what does this room look like? What do our coven meetings look like now? Where does Ana fall into that? What's she doing? What's her energy?
Oh, well, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's what I was saying. I picture her like hanging out with, like maybe some natural elements in the corner,
just
like
off,
molding some clay,
kind of doing her own thing.
Actually, it's poignant that this is burning right now, because the incense is burning right now while we're talking, because there's some really cool, and she used Super 8 cameras too. That was another really cool thing. But there's a lot of her artwork where you see like smoke coming out of the ground, and I don't know how she did that. She also made her own gunpowder and would create silhouettes with gunpowder and light them on fire, and they would light up. And yeah, there's a lot
really
of
cool.
really cool creations made by her. So welcome, Ana.
Welcome, Ana.
Bienvenida.
That's so interesting. I feel like I picture Sorwana and Anais getting along and just like chatting it up, and then maybe Alice playing some amazing, incredible music while Ana is just like making something
Sculpting
beautiful.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Sorwana and Anais are having this intellectual conversation, and
when you were talking about Anais, I felt like some parallels between her and Ana as well. The Cuban connection,
for sure.
obviously, but also the way that Anais was just so authentic, and I feel like Ana was authentic too, and she wasn't afraid
Yeah.
to be bold. She used blood in her art, and she put herself nude
Yeah.
in the ocean and with the earth, and
Wasn't afraid of her sexuality, but also like it seems like her sexuality in the sense of just like the body and the nudity, like the inherent sexuality of a body, as opposed to that like seduction that is attributed to Anais.
Yeah. I feel like Ana was kind of like the polar opposite in a way, because she would, distort her body to
It's
not.
the opposite of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. And that is like such a platonic, like that sort of like sexuality that's inherent in the body is this like, it's not pretty. Like
Right.
that sort of, yeah, it's
We
the
bleed.
primal. Yeah, it's the primal, it's the bloody, it's the messy, it's the uproot shit from the earth. And
Yeah. She also has these like series of pictures of herself with she glued like a beard on her face and a mustache, so she would also kind of play with gender too. And it was just crazy when I saw what you were wearing last week, because I was like, oh my gosh, you're wearing exactly what Ana would wear.
Fun.
So yeah, that's
What
it.
an incredible person. What an incredible story. I definitely want to look up more of her work.
Yeah. All right.
It's so tragic.
Yeah. So I guess we'll see you. Do you have any clues for me for your next person?
Yeah, I can give a quick hint.
Okay.
Super excited about her. I'll say medicine.
Oh, okay. Exciting. Well, I can't wait to see you next time.
Yeah, see you next week. Till then,
Bye-bye.
this has been another episode of Coven. Later.